The Queen's funeral was an impressive affair, but even with all the pomp, I'm not sure it met the expectations set by the Speaker of the House of Commons, Lindsay Hoyle.
It's been important to try and make sure we get it right, and it's about showing the respect and the dignity and doing it in the right way. And we should not allow anything to overshadow the most important event the world will ever see, and that's the funeral of Her Majesty. And the passing of Her Majesty has brought people together.
The most important event the world will ever see. Why has the Queen dying turned our entire media and political class into toddlers? Like that is something that you would hear in like a Disney film. The most important event the world will ever see. More important than, Allies winning the Second World War or the Communist Revolution in China. More important than going to the moon. A 96-year-old woman who, ostensibly didn't have any political power dying.
Michael, important caveat here. He didn't say human history. He said the world has ever seen. So presumably we can include, the Big Bang, the arrival of life, I'm being serious, the first mammals, humans about 200,000 years ago, agriculture about 12,000 years ago. Lindsay Hoyle, no, that all comes second to today. Well, we're very lucky if that's the case. We've seen it on BBC One this afternoon, if that's true. Very fortunate. But the fundamental point of monarchy as a political system is, of course, it rests upon sycophancy. It's generated by sycophancy. Its intellectual basis is sycophancy and a belief in human subordination. And some people literally being born to rule and others not. Now, of course, we've had in the last 150 years, people sort of mitigate that a little bit, say, well, we don't really believe in it, but it's just it's the least worst system. I prefer Republican theory. Okay, some republics don't work out, but the idea that your son or daughter is born and they're just as good to reach the very top of executive power in the country as anyone else, I think that's a really powerful idea. Look, Joe Biden was in there today, Michael, probably the least posh person in there, yet he is at the top of the political system of the most powerful nation in history. I think that's a really remarkable, animating story for a country, for a nation, for a people, personally. And the way he said Majesty, he couldn't say it. He couldn't say it quietly enough, Majesty, And Lindsay, this gentleman, the Speaker of the House, because he's got a non-received pronunciation accent, people think, red wool, proper Labour man. His dad was an MP. He comes from a sort of political family. Maybe he got there on his own merits. I don't know, Michael. But you can go really far in life and in this country if you just make your nose as brown as possible, especially in politics, particularly in politics. You can have a great political career if you just brown nose the establishment and the status quo, say that nothing is wrong, everything is hokey dokey, and the sunshine comes out their backside. You'll do really well. And Lindsay Hoyle, he's a prime example of it.
What I would really like to do, though, is an interview with someone like Lindsay Hoyle and finding out, do you really believe this? Obviously, when Lindsay Hoyle is on the Laura Kuenssberg show, no one is going to say to him, do you really mean that? Because that's not how BBC coverage works at this period of time. Someone will give an anecdote and they say, oh God, that's such a lovely story you've told. Have you got anything else nice to say about the Queen? That's literally all interviews are. But I would love to sit down with Lindsay Hoyle or Hugh Edwards or whoever, one of the people who've been on TV and not, said objectively, look, this is obviously a significant moment, so we're going to report on it, saying that the Queen is a wonderful, fabulous woman. This is the most important event ever in Lindsay Hoyle's case, and just have that conversation. Not grill them, but have that conversation, because I would love to see how Lindsay Hoyle would be able to sort of explain and justify that. It's slightly different with Keir Starmer. Obviously, he's been saying lots of ridiculous things, but the argument with him is he wants to get elected, so he's got to brown nose the Queen as much as possible. Lindsay Hoyle, I don't think he has to stand for election because he's the Speaker of the House of Commons, right? So who's he doing this for? And it's exactly the same with all of these journalists. Who are you doing this for? Have you sort of forced yourself to believe, or is this just what you're saying to fit in? Or, is it sort of four-dimensional chess, and the sort of the very thoughtful, intelligent side of you has decided that actually constitutional monarchy is the best way to maintain stability in this country, and for it to continue, people like us have to pretend that, essentially the divine right of kings still exists. Very briefly on that, Aaron, where do you think it falls?
Well, I think a lot of it goes back to basic patronage, Michael. If you want to get ahead, if you want to be rewarded, you want to get that knighthood, you want to be in the House of Lords, then you need to say the right things. We saw it with David Beckham last week. You know, again, I'm not going to impugn David Beckham. I don't know his motives for being in that queue. But what we've seen historically is in emails that have been disclosed, which were meant to be private communications, him saying, well, look, I came out for keeping the UK together during the Scottish referendum campaign. I've done X, I've done Y. You know, why haven't I been rewarded with a knighthood? And that is a very toxic system of patronage. The idea that, well, I'll do everything the establishment says if I'm allowed to, you know, have a few letters after my name, or if I can go and sit in the House of Lords and sit my ass and get £300 a day and do nothing. That's a really bad problem. And so I think whether or not you're a monarchist or a Republican, the systems of patronage that this engenders as a country are really counterproductive. It doesn't help solve problems. It gives rise to a really decadent, useless political class. It gives rise to a media which fundamentally isn't even interested in listening to people, let alone trying to give them a voice. So I would say alongside that, Michael, because of course you're talking about his comments on the BBC, this really illustrated the extent to which the BBC is not a public service broadcaster. It is a state broadcaster. There is no alternative reality or set of events where the BBC does this story in any other way. If it had a different chairman, if it had a different board, they would not make different editorial choices. The reason being, because the BBC is a state broadcaster. Lindsay Hoyle says that on the Laura Kuenssberg show, because of the intimate relationship in this country between the media and the state and political power, particularly the BBC. Everybody knows that, everybody believes that, except for several thousand liberals, and pretty much all of them work in the media and politics.